Hello everyone, what's up? Meet the new Gaahleri Mobius TG. Precision, control, and a fan cap for broader coverage. But how does it actually perform? Well, today I'm putting it to the test. We'll unbox it, check it out, and see how it handles real-world priming with AK Black Primer. And stick around, because this is just the first of several practical airbrush-related videos, including an upcoming deep dive into Gaahlerie's full range of trigger airbrushes and a video dedicated to airbrushing lacquers safely. So let's take a look together at my new toy, shall we? Like all Gaahleri airbrushes, the Mobius TG comes very well presented, with a really nice box. On the back there's an exploited view of all the parts. Here you can see the TG's most notable feature, which is its twin air caps. Inside you're greeted with a quick start guide, as usual for Gaahleri, which in this case I would say is worth reading, given the number of features that this airbrush has, as we'll see. Time to fumble with the foam insert, and look at that. Beauty, as they say, is in the eye of the beholder, but honestly this looks amazing. The highly reflective finish on the airbrush body is really beautiful, at least as shiny as my Mobius detail airbrush. But what really drew my eye immediately was the handle, which has a textured grip on the back and a really cool cutout. Even with gloves on, this felt really cool, and it looked super ergonomic, more so than my beloved Swallowtail. As soon as I grabbed it and tried the trigger for the first time, my suspicions were confirmed. This was larger and more ergonomic than any other trigger airbrush that I had used, and I could depress the trigger fully without my other fingers being in the way, or without having to rest my pinky outside of the handle. Unlike other Gaahleri airbrushes, this only comes with one detachable cup, and it's really large, which reminded me of my good old Pache Talon. One remarkable difference between this and the Pache, however, is the quality of the finish. Check that out. This is a round air cap, which allows you to spray pretty fine lines, as you will see later. The one that comes pre-installed is the famous fan cap, which for many people will be the main selling point in this airbrush. Here's a close-up. Can you see the two tiny air holes to each side of the needle? Time to attach that paint cup. Will I be able to do it on the first try with my sausage fingers? Yes, surprisingly. By the way, that thing in front of the trigger is called a Mac valve, and the main reason why I was really looking forward to this airbrush being released. More so than any other airbrush that Gaahleri has put out in the last few months, to be honest. Why is that? Because my go-to airbrush for the last year didn't have a Mac valve. This is the Gaahleri Swallowtail, side by side with the new TG. As you can see, the TG is considerably larger, and it's not just the paint cup. The body is longer, and most importantly, so is the handle. Check this out. But what does this mean in practice for me? Let me show you. To use the Swallowtail properly with my index finger, I've seen some heretical techniques out there, by the way. Half of my pinky is basically in the air. See? Obviously, that's not like a huge problem for me, but let's see the difference now. See that? Now I'm 1.85 meters tall, that's about 6 feet 1, so I'm not a small guy, but I don't have like really large hands. If I did, however, this larger handle would be a must in my opinion. In addition, the shape is far more ergonomic, and that grip at the back actually works. My only doubt was, would the paint cup be too large, especially when I record videos? Time would tell. But now it's time to test the airbrush with some primer, with a fan cap, set up for spraying horizontally. This AK Microfiller primer is a true stress test for any airbrush. Now this was literally my first few seconds with the Mobius TG, and the first time that I ever used a fan cap. Yes, this seemed to work nicely. The second pass showed that at this distance, I was holding it very close to the paper, the pattern from the two air holes in the cap was very pronounced. In my next pass, I held it farther from the paper. This was very diffuse, because I was probably being overly cautious with the trigger. The rest of the time I played around a bit, also trying to do overlapping passes, left to right and right to left. I think I had the angle slightly wrong, as I should have sprayed perpendicular to the surface, and I was still being too cautious with the trigger. In any case, this first experience, not only with the airbrush, but with a fan cap, was very enjoyable. One thing I think you should look at is Exhibit A. This primer tends to create a rather grainy finish because of the microfiller. Here you can see that the airbrush was able to atomize it super finely even when going very lightly on the trigger and probably using it incorrectly. Having changed to the round cap, but not before making a right mess, it was time to continue. Why did I make a mess, you ask? Well, let's just say that I found out the hard way that you're not supposed to change caps on this with paint still inside. But let's move on, eh? Here you can see me draw some pretty thin lines with the airbrush, holding it very close to the paper. But what I really wanted to show you was the on-off transition. To my mind, this is the real magic of a good double action trigger airbrush. See that? Even with this pretty thick primer, the on-off-on transition is flawless, and the paint is atomized perfectly. Doing this on a traditional airbrush takes some practice and skill. So if you're starting out now, there is no doubt in my mind about what type of airbrush I would recommend. A trigger one. Also, if like me, you sometimes spray for extended periods of time, or if you have a condition like carpal tunnel or arthritis, this airbrush could make a big difference for you. Now for the Mac valve test. Simply tighten that screw and you're ready to go. The possibilities when it comes to weathering are endless. This is what is known as airbrush stippling, and it's amazing when combined with products like Life Color liquid pigments, for example. See that? With this you can easily create an effect of speckled dirt, mud, rust, or even blood splatter effects if you like. Can you go back to spraying normally straight away? Yes, of course. A few turns, and there we go. Back to spraying thin lines without any effort. When I was about to pack things up, I had a thought. What about a smaller cup? I took the one from my 0.2mm Mobius, a normal detail airbrush, and I just tried it on. After fumbling around with it, it was clear that it did fit. Interesting, I thought. I added some paint and checked out how it looked. Intriguing. Okay, so time to really put the Mobius TG through its paces by priming real models. This is part of the pedestal for a lion statue by RT Diorama, which will be the focus of one of my next few videos. And here you can see the other part of it. I'm gonna prime both using the same AK black primer you saw me use before. The pressure will be the same, 20 psi. I will be using the round cap on the TG, and the Mac valve will be fully open, of course. In these first few passes you can already see how well the airbrush is performing. The black paint is atomizing beautifully, and I'm able to go super light on the trigger without any issues. Here I took it even slower, and as you can see, there is no dry tip and the finish is completely smooth. So, a few minutes later, one of the two parts of the pedestal was perfectly primed. Time to change to a larger canvas. Here I deliberately took things to the extreme in terms of trigger use. Check out how smooth the finish is. This is a true stress test for any airbrush, as the amount of paint that I'm letting through is absolutely minimal. I believe this proves that although the TG was designed from the ground up specifically for the fan cap, it still performs really well as a general purpose airbrush. So a few minutes later, both parts of the stone pedestal were fully primed. Time for the lion itself to get primed now, which had prepped and textured the day before. Again, that and the actual paint job will be covered in a separate video, showing you a new verdigris product. But I digress. Let's start priming this thing, shall we? I'm not going to show you the entire process, but suffice it to say that, once again, the Mobius TG performed flawlessly. At this stage, I had been using it non-stop for 15 minutes with no sign of fatigue from me or of dry tip or any other issues from the airbrush. Once again, great results. I was very happy with the experience so far. To conclude my testing, I wanted to try what is supposedly one of the main use cases for this airbrush: getting smooth coverage on large surfaces. This is a Stalingrad Diorama Base, also by RT Diorama. Same primer, same pressure, 20 psi, but with the fan cap on this time. Now, if you've seen many of my videos, you will know that doing a tack coat first that is to say a very light initial layer of paint, has become sort of muscle memory for me. So that's what I did here as well. However, note that that is not how you're supposed to spray with a fan cap. But anyways, despite my unorthodox technique and through the clouds of solvent, I think that you can tell that the results I was getting were pretty good nonetheless. I've used 0.7mm needles for priming plenty of times, and this was faster and in no way inferior in finish. A few minutes later, I did have to add more paint to the cup, as even when being overly cautious on the trigger, I was still spraying quite a lot of product. As I relaxed a bit more and went for total opacity, the clouds of solvent were everywhere, making my extractor struggle, but I was really enjoying the process. By the way, speaking of clouds of solvent, I will be covering airbrush safety in a dedicated video soon. In any case, here on the sides of the base, you can really see the insane covering power of the fan cap, even when sprayed at a close distance. And that was it. A perfectly primed diorama base in record time, to be more precise, in less than 7 minutes, guys. In other words, mission accomplished and a clear win for the Mobius TG. So, final thoughts on the Gaahleri Mobius TG. Honestly guys, I'm really impressed. The aesthetics, the ergonomics, and that more premium feel, this is a step up from the Swallowtail, which I love. Add in the mag valve, which is what the Swallowtail was really missing in my opinion, and you've got a really powerful tool. Now, it's not all perfect. There are things I didn't like, of course. Unlike with the Swallowtail, here you get only one needle size, and there's only a single large paint cup. Also, I really miss the needle cap, which I use all the time whenever I clean the airbrush to do a back flush. But honestly, when you factor in the price for this is still an absolute killer offer. Is it the best trigger airbrush that Gaahleri offers? Well, that's what I'll be testing next in my upcoming Gaahleri trigger airbrush comparison, so stay tuned for that. And if you're thinking of picking up a Gaahleri airbrush for yourself, don't forget, you can save 10% with my exclusive discount code. Before I let you go, a huge thanks to my Patreon supporters, who make these videos possible, quite literally, because if I had to rely on YouTube ad revenue, I'd be thinning my paints with hopes and dreams. And speaking of Patreon, our Thunder Warrior painting competition, the Kategi's Clash competition, is in full swing. The winner will be taking home a brand new Gaahleri Swallowtail SD airbrush from me. Once the judges panel convenes on March 8th, I'll be publishing a dedicated video showcasing the work of all participants. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed this one, guys. Thanks for watching, and remember, keep it up and weather it out.